I wish good things to you who's watching this. I am Alexey, and as I'm recording this about 2 hours ago, I happened to win this international Carcassonne tournament for 200 participants. And I will be walking you through my tournament journey, through the most interesting games or interesting moments and parts thereof, showcasing how Carcassonne is played at this level. And over the course of the video, there will be multiple pause the video moments where you can look at these positions and try to find the key moves yourself. But before we do that, a couple of words about the tournament. As you can see on this page, the tournament is called the Mindsports Olympiad, although that's not the name of the tournament, it's the name of the whole meta event, which lasts around a month. It is designed to be like the Olympic Games, but for competitive board gaming. And Carcassonne, although a recent addition to the Mindsports Olympiad, which has been running for over 25 years, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the most popular ones. As you can see, the number of participants has been growing, with the exception of 1 year. And y'all also might see my name already in one of the previous events, because I did win gold in 2021 as well, with 141 participants. And some of my viewers will know this because I already published a review of several games from that tournament from 4 years ago. And for those of you who are new to this, you can also watch those videos if you like. But I want to think that I've learned something new over the course of the last 4 years. So it's time to jump into the games. Before we do that, though, a bit about the tournament format. It is a 2-day event, and it first starts with an open qualifier open to anybody with the world, and it consists of 7 rounds. In order to get to the next stage, you're supposed to win 6 out of 7 at the very least. Then after that, all the players who have won 6 out of 7 games, which is typically between 7 and 10 players, if there are around 150 participants in each qualifier, they need to play a mini playoff until the top 4 remain. And so I participated in the morning qualifier, or at least the morning qualifier for European players. There's also the evening qualifier, which favors a little bit players in the Western Hemisphere. And we are going to go ahead and jump for the first game. So on the first round, the pairings are completely random, and then later on, the pairings are according to a Swiss system, which is common in many other board game events, including chess. It in fact originates from chess, where players with the same number of victories are paired up together each round. So if you keep winning, then your opponents get progressively more and more difficult. But even on the first round, I'm paired up against an expert from Norway with a screen name Hognai. Also, it needs to be pointed out that almost half of the fields were experts and masters, including multiple former world champions as well. This is because the event is online, so traveling is not an issue, and really anybody who is good at this game, or even who isn't good at this game, can participate. So my opponent gets the starting player advantage, and they start with this tile over here. I won't be walking through the entire game. In fact, I will be walking only through some key moments. We sort of make some natural move at the start. They start a city, I invade it. They start a monastery. I start a city on my own, obstructing their monastery a little bit. But I'm going to just show you a couple of key positions here, and then for a couple of games towards the end, those we're going to see from start to finish. Note that I'm also showing you the analysis with this tile counter over here so that you can see what going through the player's mind a little bit better. But this tool was not available to the players during the tournament, and in fact is prohibited during online play. So all the calculations about the number of points and the number of each type of tile remaining in the deck had to be performed mentally by the players. So I start a new road, and my opponent tries to block that road, so there's still 3 tiles that fit into that square. But if they place something here or here, then they could trap my meeple permanently by making sure that no tile in existence fit into that square. So we continue with some normal moves. And then soon enough, as you see, I will be getting some pretty good tiles and getting myself quite a strong position. So for example, now I sacrifice a point trying to play against their monastery and road. So I'm putting pressure on this square, I'm putting pressure on this square as well. But they do happen to draw quite quickly a tile that gets them a meeple back. But I don't get to complain because I quite quickly get a tile that starts me a new city and saves my road. It's still open-ended on both sides, but with 8 crossroads still remaining in the deck, I can quite easily complete it. I complete my 6-point city, get a bit ahead on the scoreboard. My opponent completes a 9-point monastery. They reclaim the lead on the scoreboard, but I get this lovely 5-point monastery spot over here. I place it on a very safe square, and also a square which happens to control my opponent's road. So they will be willing to get their meeple back eventually by building up a loop perhaps, and as they build up their road, I will be freeloading with my monastery from this little monastery point that they will be adding to me. They now continue their city. And in addition to continuing this city, they're actually exposing a threat. So they want to draw some sort of city tile that fits into the square, blocking my road meeple, making sure that nothing fits there. And if they don't do that, then I have a counter threat. There's still both road monasteries in the deck, and if I get a road monastery, that would be, first of all, an end for my road, an extra point for my road, and then a 7-point monastery as well. So they would need to act quickly if I'm trying to block. I don't get a tile to continue over here, not a straight line, or what I could also get is maybe one of these 4 crossroads, go over here and defend a square, and defend the square so that a straight line still fits there, but nothing else fits there. So instead I just start a new city on the right, covering up one side of the road. Note that I do not want to be finishing my city at the top. And this is to ensure some efficient building. So this is something that's called the principle of 2 cities, something that I've talked about on my channel many, many times. In particular, there are multiple extender tiles still in the deck, such as this one, the one I happen to draw. And because of that, I want to keep a city open at all times so that with this tile, I can later extend it and continue. But if I were to place this tile over here, for example, and close my city and get a meeple back, then with this extender, it would have been much harder for me to make a productive move. So I keep my meeples on those features a little bit longer for the sake of efficient building. Also, this meeple over here actually will not be necessarily completing a city. In some tile runouts, there's also this idea of going over here with a Dorito, over here with another Dorito or a triangle-shaped city, then get an extender like this and a Dorito like this, and actually gain a majority on the big city with 2 versus 1 meeples, kind of looping in over here. So it looks quite unlikely, but if you think about this, all the tiles that are over here are available. So it could be after 10 moves, it could be after 20 moves, but eventually all these tiles will be drawn. So if my opponent does nothing, well then eventually I will do this and this and this, unless of course my opponent draws all the extender tiles and all the triple city tiles that go into this square. So at some point they would need to react to this threat. Maybe they get a Dorito tile and go over here, and then they're forced to spend a city tile on a feature which is not quite valuable, because let's say if we get a Dorito tile over here, then I still can connect this meeple in and make the city shared, and so their move with the city tile, hypothetical move with the city tile, it actually never came to that, then they will be scoring 0 points. So it's nice to keep these options open. But now comes an interesting moment. My opponent gets an extender tile, and they have an interesting choice. They could actually now go ahead and block my meeple over here by placing this extender like this. Actually, let me just show you a little bit clearly. Sort of like this. And then there's no tile that fits into the square. My road is already closed on one side. I can't even expand this. And I will be losing a meeple for around 7 points. For just 7 points, actually, which is, in this position, it's really not enough to justify the investment of a fully blocked meeple. But there are two reasons why they chose not to do that. Well, first of all, they really liked adding the extender to their own city, which is what they did, because it hypothetically scores them 4 points. Well, the extender itself with a shield is worth 2 points, but upon the completion of the city, which is very, very easy, the points will be doubled, so ultimately this tile is worth 4 points, and they didn't really want to make this 4-point sacrifice. But there's also one other reason. If they go over here and do block me, then I have a chance to get a Dorito tile and tie their meeple to that Dorito tile, so that their meeple is also blocked, and then they would maybe have a 7-point meeple, and so would I. So they figured that would be a bit of a wash. But I believe it happens to be a crucial mistake. They should have indeed gone for the block, for two reasons. First of all, if they do go over here, and I, for example, get a Dorito tile and go over here and try and tie their meeple to that blocked square, if I get that Dorito tile, there's still 2 splitters in the deck. So they could draw a splitter like this and still finish a city for just 6 points and preserve their meeple for future use. The second reason is the fact that the threat of the road monastery is just too severe. If I do get one of the 2 remaining road monasteries, either now or at some point, then I will be getting not only 7 points for these monasteries, I will be probably even getting a meeple back from that monastery, because there are only 2 tiles remaining to complete it, and they're quite easy to fill. And also I will be getting my road meeples back, which is really just too much. And I don't have to draw it right now necessarily. For example, I could just draw something as simple as a curve and cover up the square, making sure that a road monastery still fits there in the future. And because there are 2 tiles of those available, then it's a 75% or roughly 75% chance that I will be drawing one of those eventually in the game. And in addition, there are still other options to finish this road. For example, one of the 4 crossroads like this, plus one of the 7 straight lines, also give me 9 points and a meeple back. I happen to draw the same tile as them, so I extend my city at the top. They now, of course, won't go over here because they don't want to set up the monastery for me. But what they should have done over here is just equalize the road themselves. So a move that blue can play is go over here, meeple a road, and then with one of the 7 straight lines, they can connect. But they chose not to do that, and I think the reason is that they want to block the square in the future with one of the many city tiles available. For example, one of the 5 Doritos, they could go over here and still have the idea of the block, given the fact that no city plus road tiles would be available for that configuration. The problem with this idea is the fact that this square is actually kind of easy to defend. I can either draw one of the many straight lines and continue my road directly as I did, but even if I don't, I can use a curve to set up the monastery, as I said, or again, a crossroads to set up the completion of my road a bit later. Or even if I draw something like a city tile, for example, like a regular city cap, or let's say a Dorito, then I can use a Dorito tile like this with the field side facing up, making sure that a road monastery still fits there. But instead they choose to continue their loop roads. I get to continue my road, and now it's less dangerous. It's actually impossible to block that meeple with one move anymore. They try to set up an attacking platform against my city at the top, and then I happen to get the road monastery. I get the 6 points for the road monastery, and 8 points for the road, or 9 points for the road rather, and a meeple back. And with that, I have a pretty good advantage in this position. They, of course, get to invade my city, but I get to finish another one, start a new one, and ultimately, with 2 monasteries lead on the scoreboard, I ultimately converted this advantage. But it is worth to fast forward to another interesting moment in this game. In this position, at first it looked like blue has kind of equalized, because they came close on the scoreboard by completing this city over here. However, the position is still very, very good for yellow. So they have my monastery blocked over here. Now I won't be recovering this meeple, but this guy is already scoring 8 points. Well, I guess technically it's scoring 7, but when they get a crossroads to release the road meeple, they'll be adding me a point. So this guy scores 8 points, this guy still scores 7 and is likely to be completed. And another important thing is that I managed to be the first one on the main field in the game. This field is just fantastic. It is super open. It has already 3 completed cities on it for 9 points, a bunch of completed cities by me and by my opponents, pending, and loads of green squares for new cities, so it could grow and grow and grow. But blue here is threatening to recover multiple meeples with crossroads and with city caps, and if they get a meeple majority, which they very well could, because my monastery meeple is blocked, whereas all their meeples are recoverable, or are tied together in shared features, so it doesn't matter if they get recovered or not, then they ultimately could attack this field and win this with a meeple majority and maybe win the game that way. So the first pause the video moment, there is a tactical way to get quite a big advantage in this position. So what do you do with this road Dorito? Now, a couple of moves are possible. Oh yeah, presume that you paused the video if you wanted to, but now I'm kind of telling the answer, right? So I can just connect to the city over here, sort of equalizing the 4-point part of my opponent's city with the 1-point city that I had, but it's something that I can do a bit later. Another relatively strong move is going over here and continuing my own city and also setting up the completion of my monastery with another monastery. That's generally quite a strong tactic because there's still 3 monasteries in the deck, so over 87% chance that I will be eventually drawing one of them. And it's an easy way to recover a meeple and then get quick 6 points. This is a motif that will come a lot in competitive Carcassonne play, even later in this video as well. But I decided against this idea, first of all, because the placement of this tile is a little bit dangerous. If my opponent gets any of the 7 remaining Dorito tiles or the 5 remaining triple city tiles, then they can add it to my city like this, turning it into that square. And the problem with that square is that it is severely restricted. In fact, there would be only 1 tile that fits here. So this tile, which we call right-handed dagger in competitive Carcassonne lingo. So this would already reduce the chances of the completion of my city to just 50%. I would probably have to even wait for a long time before I get that tile. And if they do that, they're likely to follow it up with a couple of moves that would block the square completely, trapping my meeple. But the main reason why I didn't do that is because there is a much stronger move available. What I did is just did a point to my opponent, but I tied their 2 cities together. So it looks like a move that is helping my opponent at first sight, because in the base set of Carcassonne, there are 3 extender tiles that can connect their cities nicely. And there are also 3 actually, horizontal splitter tiles that can go like there and complete 2 cities for my opponent nicely. But the issue is that all of these tiles have already been drawn. So the 3 splitters are here and the 3 extenders are here. So in fact, it is not possible for them to complete that city instantly. The only way how it is possible for them to proceed is to get that triple city tile, add it over here, and then 1 more city cap to finish it. But if they do get that triple city tile, first of all, because there's only 3 of those, it could be a bit of a wait. Then I will be later able to try and block their meeples permanently, maybe by getting a Dorito tile and adding 1 more point to their city, and then turning their city into this square, and then blocking that square. There's already only 1 starting tile available on the deck, so this sort of block would be dangerous by itself, but I could later easily follow it up with something like a curve, restricting that square, blocking that square completely. And of course, there are many other ways to follow up further with a couple of straight lines, for example, or a straight line and a curve, blocking that square completely. So if I trap 2 of my opponent's meeples for a combined worth of just 5 points, then there's no way how they can fight for this big field, and then I'll probably preserve my advantage until the end of the game. And even if they somehow draw a quick sequence, or maybe not so quick sequence, of a triple city tile and a city cap, and if they do get their 2 meeples back, statistically it should take them such a long time that I will be able to exploit my temporary meeple advantage to score some more points and make the lead insurmountable. Now, fast forwarding a couple of more moves, we reach this position. Now, my advantage on the scoreboard is greater, and my opponent is quite correctly in desperation mode. So they're trying to create some threats. For example, at the top, they're starting a city, and the reason why they even placed their last meeple on this city, they try to get a Dorito plus triple city sequence to join into these 2 cities over here to overrun my city with a 2 versus 1 meeple majority and get 14 or 16 points just for themselves and also 2 meeple back. And this actually would already put them close. To deal with that, I created a counter threat by adding this straight line at the bottom, trying to set up a complete block against their 2 meeples. Any straight line, any curve. And with this tile that I have right now, it is something that I could do. I could just go over here, like this, and block the square completely. But then, because there's so many tiles that allow the block, it's something that I could do later. So instead, I figured that I would make a move that benefits me, like this, and this is what I did. I scored 8 points for the city, got a second meeple back, and also I got 3 extra points for this farmer because I'm expanding the field. And, well, let's see what happens. Blue now gets a tile which they use for defense. You see, I was about to place the Dorito tile over here for a complete block, but now it doesn't fit anymore. So I decide to finish the shared feature at the top. So give the points both for myself and an opponent and give both of us meeple back, simply to prevent this guy from sneaking into the city as described before. And then, of course, they get the triple city tile. So I try to take 2 quick points and block their city nonetheless, or at least to set up a blocking platform against their city nonetheless. And of course, they get one of the 2 city caps that does finish their city anyway. So we see that I had 1 chance to block their city completely, and I didn't do it, and then they managed to complete the city anyway. But because it took them a long time to do so, I still have the advantage in this game, so I still have a lead of 3 points on the scoreboard, and I already have multiple fields. I have this farmer with 5 completed cities, one of them just completed by my opponent, for 15 points, and this farmer over here for 6 points, so it's an over 21 points advantage, and it's just something that's too difficult to deal with at that point. I get even 3 further quick points for the road. They now try to start a counter field, which also makes a sense. They should be in desperation mode. They should be trying to just play very, very risky. So the purpose of their move, of course, is to draw another city cap, score easy 7 points, 4 for the city, 3 for the field. They also probably want to draw the other road monastery that fits into this square, which would expand their field even further. They want to complete their monastery, maybe getting a straight line, a curve like this, meepling it, getting a 5-point road, and a 9-point monastery. So if they get this lucky sequence, then they could equalize, and maybe if they try to invade my field later on, then they could even win. And so with the style that I had, I made a move that made this comeback much, much less likely, if next to impossible for them. So you can see the remaining tiles available. So pause the video right here and think how you would secure the advantage here with this straight line. So what I did, I noticed that there are no crossroad tiles available anymore, so 8 crossroads are on the board, and that allows me to make a move like this. So I made a self-invasion, basically. I dropped a farmer for 0 points with the intention of drawing one of the 8 remaining curvy tiles. Wait, one of the 4 remaining, no, one of the 5 remaining curvy tiles. But anyway, like statistically, I'm almost guaranteed to do that and invade my own field. Moreover, if I get a curve, which I'm again very likely to do, I will be meepling this road and scoring 6 points for this road. So even though I'm not gaining any extra points by bringing in a second farmer, I'm making it next to impossible, in fact, impossible for them to invade. Because in order to overrun this field of 15 points, once it has 2 yellow meeples, they would need to place more, or 3 blue meeples, and this is all they have. And even if they somehow manage to accomplish that, even though it's exceptionally difficult because there are not many attacking platforms where you could drop a farmer, maybe here, like you could join, like this, drop a farmer here and like sneak in through this curve. But after that, it is extremely difficult and it would require multiple turn sequences to first of all set up the attacking platforms and then complete the invasion afterwards, and there would be simply not enough tiles or not enough turns in the game left to do that. But even if they were to accomplish that, they would not have meeples left to score quick points, to score a 9-point monastery, which they're planning to do, and as a result, this had led to a win of about 30 points in the end. So there's no need necessarily to see the last moves. I did end up connecting to the farm with my second meeple. They ended up not bothering invading in the first place and just trying to build a little bit at the top, but at that point it just simply was not enough. So 1 point, 1 tournament point was gained in round 1, and in the second round I am paired up with a strong Swedish expert, so kind of really traveling through those Scandinavian countries, Helgi, who actually in the last year's tournament came in the top 8, which is a difficult thing to do. And also with somebody with whom I played many times, both casual games and a couple of tournament games, and somebody whom I recognize as a strong player, against whom I actually lost a bunch of times as well. So I am the starting player again. That is determined almost randomly, although not quite. So I get to meeple the first monastery. They have a lovely city tile to start, and I get the quadruple city tile, so there's only 1 legal move. Over here, I get to continue their city. They start a new city themselves. I managed to start a new city myself, and I'm also trying to pre-build a road which is going through my monastery. So we're going to go through this opening quite quick and then just look at a couple of key moments in the game. I'm building my city. They are finishing their city and getting the lead on the scoreboard. I am continuing my city, trying to make this rhombus shape. It's also quite safe because it requires multiple turns to invade. They, of course, try to invade nonetheless. Now I make a move which may look a little bit strange, but I do think it is the strongest move in this position. Actually, you know what? Yeah, pause the video. Try and see what you would do here as yellow. It's really not easy at all. It's actually kind of an awkward crossroads to be placing. So the first instinct is that you go over here, because this is where it belongs, right? It adds a point to my monastery. This square is a little bit sensitive, so I want to be finishing it. But then if you do this, it creates a bunch of problems. I leave this 3-point road back to my opponent. For example, with any road tile, and especially with the crossroads, they could just go over here and score 4 quick points. Now, I don't know, of course, what they have in hand, but I know that they could have it in hand. So there are 3 tiles in the deck, because I have one of the crossroads, there's still 3 more remaining, that they could use to just gain 4 points for free. So I can't really do that. So then I'm supposed to meeple this road for defensive purposes, but if I do that, then they get to abuse me even worse. They, for example, could have one of the triple city tiles go over here, block this square, block my road for 3 points, and enter into something that's called a winning mini battle. So when they have a city blocked, because the square is blocked, and I have a road blocked, so we each have 1 meeple blocked, but they can still add tiles to their city, whereas my road is capped with 3 points. And with still many big tiles remaining, such as the 4 triple cities, 3 extenders, and so on, they could build this city ruin up to like 12 points or something. Moreover, they could later block this square quite easily, and then in addition, they will be blocking one of my monasteries. So they could even be blocking 2 meeples. It's not a position that I want to get in. And there are some other problems with this move, so I decided to do this. To meeple the road that way, which looks quite unsafe at first glance, but in fact it is pretty safe. There are multiple ways to finish that road, and if Helgi chooses to somehow try and restrict this road, no matter how they do this, there will be at least 3 tiles that fit there for like an 88% chance of completion. So you can either place one of the 9 curves, one of the 3 dagger tiles, so these guys, or one of the 3 remaining crossroads. And if you place one of the curves, then you do run into that problem that this road sticks into our opponent's city. But then I don't have to place a curve there just yet. I can decide. For example, I could draw something like the triple city with the road, go over here, and kind of pre-finish my road whilst also expanding their city and making their city harder to complete. Then I can result in a 6-point road, a meeple back, whilst their city is still here, a little bit sad. Now we're gonna blitz through a couple of moves, and now also an important move. So I could, of course, place the curve over here, but y'all might already guess that I didn't. The reason I don't want to place this curve over here... Wait, why doesn't it work exactly? Yeah, there we go. The reason why I don't want to do that is because, again, they could get a curve of their own and restrict or block this square completely, trapping 2 of my meeples, the road and the monastery, against only 1 of their meeples, which would give them a long-term meeple advantage, not something that we want to have. So instead, I went over here. And it looks like I am restricting my own road, which I am. But I'm restricting it to 3 tiles, and with 3 tiles, there's an 88% chance of me eventually drawing them. Of course, 12% of the time I don't, but against a strong player, it's really not that big of a risk. And moreover, I'm actually setting up a lot of points. If I get that tile, then of course I'm getting my road meeple back, and I get to score an extra monastery point, so 4 points from this road. But I will also be instantly meepling this 4-point road and getting 4 points road from this. So 8 points on the scoreboard and a meeple back. This is what I'm setting up. But my opponent now gets a 3rd monastery, and my position is now really, really difficult. These monasteries, if completed, they will score 27 points, and there's really no coming back from that. So I try to score as much as possible, simply to brace for impact. I score a 3-point road next to the monastery, which, by the way, they would have scored themselves for 3 points had I not done that. So the meeple a new road, I finish a city. And they get quick city points over here. So I am 5 points ahead on the scoreboard, but overall still, this position is better for them. Even if I get my 8-point setup, I will be at 21. But these monasteries are already scoring 18, and it's so likely that we'll be getting their meeples back. They'll also have like a little piece of road, so they do in fact have a better position. But there is a way here, as my most devoted viewers will know, well, what the move here is, to delay those monasteries and actually equalize the position. I'll let you pause the video for a couple of seconds. I was actually hoping for this exact tile for like a couple of moves, because it means that it allows a move like this, something that competitive Carcassonne players call the Ukrainian technique, because it was the Ukrainian master Kirilo Manihov who described and popularized that idea. So I am actually spending a meeple and scoring net -1 point at the moment, because I'm scoring 2 points for the city, but I am adding 1 point to each of their monasteries, so it's net -1. But what this move does, it first of all severely delays the development of those monasteries, and second, in order to complete those monasteries, Helgi would need to go over here and over here with city tiles, and they would need to help me build the city in the process. So I would be getting some compensation. And the city tiles, it's something that they would have liked to use for their own construction projects, for example, at the top. But that's not all. If they don't do anything, well, then I don't do anything. Except using these platforms, I can actually build up and add points to my city. And if that happens, then even though these monasteries will still be scoring all those points at the end of the game, they will be trapped. And they will have 3 meeples stuck, and I have only 1 meeple stuck for net 2-point meeple advantage. And I can use that meeple advantage to good use, for example, building a field somewhere, and that would make sure that I score enough to compensate for those monasteries and then some. And without this move, so I know that many players, many expert players have aversion to stuff like this, but without this move, I'm pretty sure that I'm losing the game. Just because it's so easy for them to complete the monasteries. For example, they could just draw like straight lines, multiple straight lines, like loads of those in the deck, or curves, and just get a meeple back like this. What this move does, one extra thing that it does, it actually makes sure that road tiles no longer fit here for building up the monasteries. And with that, their monastery meeples were stuck for quite some time. I then entered in a couple of other mini battles, tried to block them a little bit. They, of course, are trying to build up their monastery in a bit of a different way. And they're now threatening a city. I decided to add a monastery point to Helgi, simply to try and block that square, or at least make it less likely that they manage to draw a tile that fits there, because then I guarantee that they are losing 2 of their monastery meeples, and then by adding a couple of city tiles over here, actually I get to block the square fully with tempo, and then maybe I even get to go over here and block this square, whilst also building up my city and adding points. Moreover, with this restriction, I make sure that they need the same tile for both of these squares, so something that's known as a Sophie's Choice block, because they have to make a Sophie's Choice which meeple to save. Of course, they choose wisely, and they place this tile not near the monastery, but near their city, which is about to get completed, and if they do complete that city, then my position is bad again, so I add a cow tile to their city, which is counterintuitive at some level, but I create an attacking platform and I make sure that they complete their city not with one move, but with 2 moves. And because it now takes 2 tiles to complete the city instead of just 1, I have more time to try and block or attack it. At the start of the game, it's not a move that I would normally play, but in this middle game, them finishing a 12-point city and getting a meeple back is a threat so severe that I just need to address that. But an important issue here is the orientation of this tile. So I kind of spoiled the move, but anyway, there will be many pause the video moments from now on. Now, it's a very subtle thing. Like, it's a very common tactic to add this sort of cow. This triple city is typically called a cow in competitive Carcassonne lingo to delay the development of your opponent's city, but the orientation is really not obvious. So do you turn it like this, or do you turn it with the field side up? The thing is that the orientation of the field side up is actually most common. There are some reasons for this. Well, actually, I'm making a video. Obviously, I'm going to tell you the reasons for this. So the reasons for this are the fact that it creates 2 potential invasion platforms. And in order to finish the city, your opponent would need to draw 2 city caps. One over here and one over here. But this configuration is most of the time inferior because it creates only 1 invasion platform for me potentially, and it creates different opportunities for your opponent to finish their city. They could either draw back-to-back city caps, or they could draw 3 Dorito tiles, 3 triangles. And in fact, if they manage to draw even the first Dorito, then they're not only setting up the completion of their city, they've actually prevented me from invading because they've eliminated this invasion platform over here. But there are 2 reasons why I chose this particular orientation. And again, had I not done that, I would have probably lost the game. First of all, if I were to go the other way, then the 2 invasion platforms I would be creating, they would actually be severely restricted because of these 2 squares are restricted. So I would be hoping for either a Dorito tile or a splitter or a city cap, which is still a decent number of tiles, but with a large number of city caps available. Just look at this, look at this, look at all these city caps. They would be likely to get both city caps before even I have a chance to invade their city. Another reason is the fact that 6 out of 10 Dorito tiles are already on the board, and there are only 4 of them remaining. So that 3 Dorito tile pattern that I just described in this particular game is actually super unlikely. So first of all, they would need to draw 3 out of 4 Doritos, for which there actually is a 50% chance, but they also would need to draw it soon enough. And because there's so many more city caps available, the pattern where they finish their city with a city cap and another city cap is more likely. But if they do get a city cap and place it over here, then I will have an invasion platform against the city and I will have a chance to equalize all those points. Moreover, this invasion platform at the top will be better than these potential 2 invasion platforms at the bottom because the square at the top will be not restricted. So let's see what happens later in the game. They do get the city cap, which by the way they should, because like if I don't have a city tile right now in hand, for example, if I have a curve or something, the situation is super difficult for me. But I do happen to have a city tile, and I do successfully invade the city, and ultimately it ends up being equalized. So we can see a few more moves in this game. Although the critical decisions have pretty much passed, as I managed to stop the onslaught of the monasteries. It's kind of about building, recovering meeples. Well, there will be some complexities later on. You can see that Helge used the same type of approach that I used against them, so they add a cow tile to my city, making it much harder for me to complete it. I'll just blitz through those moves. Like, there are some extra reasons for those. So, for example, the reason why I chose to take 2 points over here, I could have scored 2 points pretty much anywhere, is the fact that I am the only player who has meeples. And given the fact that I'm still at a bit of a disadvantage, because Helge still has a lot of threats. They still could complete their monasteries, all 3 of them. They still have a lot of points. They have a nice farmer over here. They will be getting a meeple back soon enough from this city. There's still actually a chance for them to complete this city, which is sandwiched between my 2 monasteries. So there are really a lot of threats in that position. So I actually want to set up some big scoring opportunities for myself. And what this move does, it sets up, first of all, an option to draw a splitter tile, of which there's still 1 remaining, and invade the city through a Dorito tile like this. And this would be a game-winning move. It would score upward of 20 points, give me 2 meeples back, and there's really no coming back from this. Now, if Red had meeples in hand, they could, of course, invade themselves, but since at the moment they don't have meeples in hand, it's only me who can benefit from that opportunity if it arises. And again, like, I'm scoring 2 points regardless, so why not score 2 points and also shape the board to our liking? There's also another sneaky idea. There are actually other tiles available. So if I get an extender, a triple city tile, a Dorito, and another Dorito, and again, it's still possible, I would be able to get this meeple into this city. That's something what I like to call the crawling technique. It does not something that occur very often because it requires a very particular sequence of tiles, but in this case, I get to set that up completely for free without sacrificing any points. So even that opportunity adds a little bit to my chances of winning the game. Yeah, Helge, of course, blocks my city completely. I get a road meeple back. We will blitz through a few moves. Some quick points being scored for both sides. Red is recovering a meeple here already. This move from Red is super smart. So what they're trying to do, they're trying to restrict the square next to the monastery, and they're doing so that they can still threaten the completion of their city over here. And it's actually not easy to prevent, so I can only draw one of the 2 remaining city cap tiles or a monastery that fits into the square. Then this would block the square completely. This would block Red city together with my own monastery, but chances are that Red could draw the starting tile before I draw a blocking tile. There are still 2 of these guys that fit into this square remaining, as you can see on the left. And then if that happens, they set up the completion of my city, of their city, and they block my monastery as well. So I was quite fortunate that said sequence of tiles never occurred. Also notice here how with this Dorito tile, I'm trying to set up a full block of the city. I'm also trying to restrict their field, so I added 2 points to my city side and made sure that Helge cannot drop any more city caps in their field for green squares. So if they have to grow their field and get more cities on it, the only way to do so right now is to get a city plus road cap over here and score 4 points for the city. But some of the city plus road caps they already need for this city. For example, they need the umbrella tile over here, and they need the starting tile at the top, as we just discussed. Although it's not actually obvious who needs this tile there, because a lot of this depends on timing. Because the city over here is between my 2 monasteries, it's actually a beneficial situation for them, because we're kind of playing a bit of a game of chicken. So if they manage to get the starting tile and place it over here, then they would be blocking my monastery, and then their city would be live, and they would be threatening me to complete it. So then it would be my job to block this square, to block my second monastery, simply to prevent red from completing their city. But if I get a crack at this square first, if I get something like a road monastery or a starting tile and place it over here, then I will be threatening to draw one of the two remaining Dorito with the road tiles, go over here, add just 1 point to their already blocked city. I would be completing my monastery, getting a meeple back, and even meepling this new 5-point road, which would control Red's monastery as well. And then in that case, Helge would be striving to block that square. So it's actually not clear who needs a tile to be placed over here. And Helge decides to set up the completion of this city. So this means that if I get a Dorito, but again, this is actually the same situation. So like, if they get the starting tile first, then if I draw a Dorito, I can't place it over here. I have to hope to draw both of them. But if they draw a Dorito first, it's very risky for them to place the Dorito over here because they would be giving me my monastery meeple back without a guarantee that their city would be completed, because it is still blockable with one of the 3 tiles that fit into this square. So at the moment, let's just blitz through some more moves. They quite menacingly finish a 4-point city, get 3 extra for the field, finish a monastery, get a monastery meeple back, and they get some more green squares for further development. They can now drop a splitter tile, for example, in their field and bring their field to 15 points even. And I don't have many meeples, so I can't really attack their field that easily. In the meantime, at the top, I'm adding 2 points to my ruin. And I'm not sure if my opponent notices this, but I'm actually trying to climb all the way over here and eat up this big city, which is still possible. They now decide to meeple the 5-point road, which is a smart choice. So they are preventing the idea of maybe me drawing the Dorito and meepling the road for myself. And they're now really trying to complete that city. There's still a decent chance of that happening. I decide to drop a 6-point farmer for a couple of reasons. So first of all, I have 2 meeples, I can use them, and this is the biggest feature on the board available at the moment. Moreover, there's a 3rd city cap available, so if I manage to get something like a vanilla or a splitter, vanilla, by the way, is Carcassonne lingo for just a regular city cap with a field and nothing else. So I get to go over here, score 4 points, and develop my field to 3 completed cities and 9 points. And then even after that, there is a chance with back-to-back tiles to merge with the main field of Helge and start a big field fight. Even though it might benefit them rather than me, I need to make sure to be quite proactive with this, because if I don't place a farmer here, well, then they have the idea of placing the same tiles in all those squares and actually expanding their field so much to add all this field to their possession over here. So this is a farm in its own right, but it's also basically equalizing Red's farm in advance. They try to limit my field, which is not that easy. I drop a city cap in my field. They score 4 points and that's 1 point because they score 4 points for the city, but they're adding 3 to my field, so that's net 1 for them. I now decide to limit my field, but this is solely to prevent an invasion. Without this tile over here, Helge could easily go over here, claim this 6-point farm, and then with the tile here or here, invade and share these 9 points with me. And given how blocked up this board is, it even could be worth for them to be spending their last meeple for this endeavor. And now Helge decides that they're going to be going all out for the city. So they go over here, they complete my monastery, and basically they're saying that they're trying to draw the last remaining starting tile before I draw one of the now 2 available blocking tiles, which is a monastery and a city cap over there. Now, of course, statistically, they're not the favorite to do that, but if they are successful, the expected value of that is huge. They get a meeple back, they block mine meeple, and they double all their city points, turning this 9-point city into a 20-point city, so that's plus 11. And there are all kinds of nasty ideas after this. They could even drop a farmer, get a curve, and get a 6-point field over here. So that could be quite the devastation. But the downside of their move is that they give me a meeple back. And what I can do, I can try to anticipate that option and brace for impact, try to get as much compensation as I possibly can, so that if they happen to draw the starting tile, but they do so very, very late, then I still might win this game. They end up blocking the invasion opportunity that I was talking about. So first of all, they recognize my plan to sneak in over here and eat up all those points. So of course they decide to restrict that square a little bit. Well, it's not just about restricting that square, it is denying this meeple access to this over here. But at the very least, I'd still get to climb at the top, and I still get to try and take advantage of these 2 city tiles to simply build up my ruin a little bit more and try to score as many points as possible. And then I get a splitted tile, of which I score 7 points, 4 for the city, then for the farm. They get the last remaining vanilla tile. They get to score 4 points. They do give me 3 field points, but they are setting up a potential attacking platform. And to be honest, at this moment, I was kind of short on time, and I wasn't exactly sure about all the tiles remaining. So I then later counted that invasions are quite unlikely, but as you can see from this tile here, there is a combo which allows them to invade the field. So if they get something like a crossroads plus a starting tile, then they get to invade. But they need a starting tile anywhere here to complete the city. But I get now a tile which should secure me the win in this game in most scenarios. At least I had so calculated. I now finish a shared city and drop a farmer for 6 points. In addition, I'm bringing this farmer up to 9 points because it now has 3 completed cities on it, and I'm gaining 9 points for the price of 1 meeple. I still have a 15-point field over here, and it's just not enough time for Helge to deal with everything. They decide to prolong their field. They get themselves an extra city in their field, but there's one mistake that they made, is that they forgot to meeple this 1-point city. It might look weird, but the reason why you have to meeple this 1-point city is the fact that there is only 1 tile for them remaining. And you can see, so this is the tile, this is their tile pool from their perspective. And they have 2 meeples to spend. So they have to spend this 1 meeple over here because it's better to score 1 point than to score 0 points. It's as simple as that. So normally, of course, you don't want to be meepling 1-point features. But on the last couple of moves, you just need to calculate your meeple spending so that you get yourself not in a meeple surplus, so that you actually get to spend all of the meeples by the end of the game. Because if a meeple is not spent, it's pretty much wasted. Now here, I actually thought for several minutes, I almost ran down my time completely. Now I did calculate that this move over here for 3 points is in fact my best end game, because I get a meeple back and I get to reuse it. And now we find out that I get to draw the starting tile, and Helge gets the monastery. So they don't get to complete their city, but they get to place a monastery for 8 points. And I get to go over here and take a 6-point farm. And then we will see the points counted in just a second. So I end up winning this game with a 10-point difference, but it is worth to see what would have happened had they drawn the starting tile and completed their city. So there's an easy way to calculate this. So on their last move, they got 8 points for the monastery, and I got 6 for this field over here, eh? Then, if they were to draw the starting tile, they would have scored 11 points for turning a 9-point city into a 20-point city. They would be dropping a 3-point farmer just because they can. And they would be giving me 1 monastery point, so they would be losing 1. So they would be getting themselves 13 points from that. But I would be getting a monastery, so I would be getting 8 over here instead of 6. So they would be getting 5 more compared to what they got in the game, but I would be getting 2 more. So overall, they would have gained 3 more points than they would have had, still losing the game by 7 points. So it did seem from their perspective that they would need to either try and invade a field or complete their city, and they really did their best, I think, trying to set up all those threats, but there just simply was not enough time to do all those things, even though they had the meeples to do them. So I was very fortunate to win this one. It was a difficult game, and there were a couple of key moments. So the Ukrainian technique against 3 monasteries was super, super important, and as you can see, 2 of the monasteries ended up being trapped. One of the monasteries ended up being not trapped, but they took quite their sweet time in recovering, and I was able to use the temporary meeple advantage to take a stronghold on multiple fields and not allow easy opportunities to score for my opponent. And the blocked city itself ended up scoring a little bit for 5 points. The other moment, of course, with the rotation of this cow tile, that was super, super important to get that right. And with the combination of these tiles, I was able to win 2 out of 2. So I was very happy about that one. And now we will be moving on to round 3. In round 3, I'm playing the Taiwanese master with the screen name Ayeba11, who has represented Taiwan in the World Team Carcassonne Online Championship multiple times. So a strong player, but I do get the starting player advantage, which I'm quite happy about. And start a new city, then they invade. So at the start, we will be having some standard moves, although I was kind of happy to see this move over here, which I think is a mistake. They're adding a point to what is likely to become a shared feature, whereas it's a bit better to place this tile somewhere over here and start a new city for themselves. Also, in some scenarios, I can draw one of these 2 splitters and go over here and invade the city through a triple city tile and try to win myself a big city for 16 points and 2 meeples back. But of course, it doesn't happen necessarily, and now we can see their plans. What they're trying to do, they're trying to build around this square, they're trying to block that square, and make it so that my meeple here is trapped with 3 points, but they can build their city for many, many more points, even though the city is blocked. So this is something from what we know as previous game as a mini battle. But luckily, I get a tile with which I can connect. But is it really that lucky? So first of all, actually, you know what? Pause the video and do let me know what you would do in this situation. And I'm gonna reveal the answer. You can see that I already sort of kind of gave y'all a hint that no, the move is not to invade over here. No expert player would do this because it's unbelievably dangerous with any city cap. This gives back a platform for your opponent to go over here, draw a Dorito, and then win the city with a 2 versus 1 majority. I definitely don't want to be doing that. So instead, I just place this tile over here. Even though it hurts my road a little bit, the point of this move is to cover up a monastery spot. So if this tile wasn't here, one of the 6 monasteries could be placed over here for 5 points. And because my opponent is about to go, they're more likely than me to draw the monastery before I do. So this is just defense against a potential threat of a 5-point monastery. They really like continuing the idea of blocking that square, and now it actually opens up the possibility for somebody to go over here and try to overrun that city through the quadruple city tile like this. So that would certainly be a move for content if that game were to be streamed, but competitive Carcassonne players typically don't do that unless they are severely behind and absolutely have to, because if you do something like this, well, if you are successful, then that's great, you overrun the city, but if you're not successful, and there's a 50-50 chance, like it's just a coin flip, there's one tile in the deck and any of those 2 players can draw this tile with an equal chance. So let's say if red goes over here with a city cap, invades, and if I draw the starting tile, then of course I get to discard it somewhere, maybe here, and then they just end up stuck with a 1-point meeple trapped. So this would of course be not ideal for them. But then again, like from my perspective, I also don't want them to do that. I want to try and like outplay them or outmaneuver them, and if they do invade over here, well then there's nothing that I can do. It's just literally putting the whole game on a 50-50 coin flip. And most of the time players don't like doing this unless they absolutely have to. But now, for example, they could do that. I would not mind this, because if they go over here, this exposes a platform for me to reconnect, and I can actually use that platform. But if the city were to be covered up, like imagine if they were a city cap over here, probably from red's perspective, I would actually go ahead and do that. So the reason for this, it's of course a big gamble, but the upside is huge. There's a 50-50 chance of you drawing the quadruple city tile and scoring what is like 22 points for a completed city or something like this. So the upside's really big. If you lose though, you do have a blocked meeple, which is bad, but since this meeple is already scoring a little bit, you're going to have 2 red blocked meeples against 1 blocked meeple of yellow. Then it gives you a few more points, and still with 1 blocked meeple you can recover from this game. So with some lucky tile draws you can still come back. So if there were a city cap over here, and if red were to invade, then that in fact would be a good move, because that would give them a more than 50% chance to win the game. There's also an interesting situation that sometimes if they invade, and imagine if this tile weren't here, and if my city is completed, there's this motif that every competitive Carcassonne player is absolutely dreaming, something that occurs roughly, I don't know, like once every couple thousand games, but it does occur, the forced quadruple city tile motif. So if this square is covered up, and then imagine if this is not here, then if red invades, and then I draw the quadruple city tile, this becomes the only legal square on the board where I can place it. So I am forced to complete my opponent's city for them on my turn. It's just... And there are a couple percentage points which added to win probability if you do attempt a invasion through the quadruple city tile. So it's something that I will need to address, because I would really not want for my opponent to do something like this, but there's really not that much that I can do. I finish my road, start a new city, so all of that good stuff. I start a new monastery to control their city. We will get a certain critical position and we will stop after it. I get to stack my monasteries, which is absolutely lovely, so I get to score quite a bit. And now I get a Dorito tile. And for example, now I could go and try and complete that invasion with a quadruple city tile like this. Well, do pause the video and let me know, would you do that? And would you do something else? And if so, what would you do with this triangle tile? So this one's really tricky. A move which is not bad. I could just ignore that square in the first place. I could just place it over here, for example, and set up a new city whilst also building up my monasteries. This move is also okay. But given the fact that I drew back-to-back monasteries, which are exceptionally powerful, like the way they get built up really, really quickly. It's only now that they each have 4 points. Like in a matter of a few moves, they will both be completed for 18. So them as yellow, I'm perceiving my position to be pretty good. These two city meeples are restricted, but whatever. Like this monastery is where all the gold is. Quite literally, if you look at the color of the meeples. So rather than going for an extra gamble, I kind of want to eliminate the threat myself. So I play this move. I make sure that there's still 2 tiles that fit into this square, so I have a 75% of drawing one of them and actually connecting to this city. But I also meeple this Dorito. And now this Dorito creates a couple of interesting options, because I'm sort of threatening of maybe going over here with a couple of Doritos and a city cap and actually invading the cities like this for not a 50 but a 75% chance of success, which is pretty good, combined with the monasteries which I'm already building. So this creates a threat that my opponents need to address, and they do find the correct move, but that's okay because this meeple can still be a normal city with a bunch of Doritos or a couple of city caps. It is a bit awkwardly placed, but I still have to place a meeple there just to create that threat. Then I try to cover up the square, and it's absolutely worth doing so, because if I don't do this, my opponent can get a city cap, and they can invade, and they can get the Dorito, they can get a second meeple in, and then they have the 75% chance to draw a cow tile, place it over here, overrun this city with 2 versus 1 meeples for like 24 points, and get themselves 2 meeple back, something that my 2 monasteries would not be enough to compensate for. So then, of course, I have to sacrifice points in order to prevent that opportunity. They now try to block my meeples a little bit, and I make sure to cover up. So I make sure that there's still 4 tiles that fit into this square. So these tiles right there, I hope you can see them. And it's also quite important to do, because I recognized how many crossroads there still are in the deck. And the reason I wanted to do that, I didn't want to allow them a blocking move with tempo. So they could score with this crossroads right now 3 points for a road, also restricting my city not to 4 tiles, but just 3 tiles. So these 3 left-handed daggers, as we call them, and then they would also be setting up another 2-point road, which they can use to set up a blocking platform to block my meeple completely. Now, in addition to this, I'm actually threatening to meeple a 5-point road if I do happen to get one of the 3 remaining starting tiles that fits into that square. So they respond to this threat by meepling this road themselves, which is pretty smart, but then it also lets me breathe a sigh of relief. Now that I have a 1-point city there, and they have a 2-point city there, actually it doesn't matter for me that I get this meeple back anymore. Because 1 blocked meeple against 1 blocked meeple, it's a wash, and I get to prioritize the recovery of these here meeples on features where I would recover a meeple just for myself and not my opponent. So I get to build up a little bit, and here comes the key position that I wanted to show you in the game. This is super interesting decision. So I get a cow tile, and it's a difficult situation. So before I say anything, what would you do if you were yellow here? So, well, we have a choice, right? We can invade, which, now that red has built up the city a little bit, looks like it is more important, right? Because I have still only 3 points on my side, yellow already has 7 points on their side, and they can grow and grow and grow and grow. So they could get 15 points or something. So I kind of can equalize. But if I do that, my opponents could draw something like one of the 6 remaining city caps that fit into that square, like a starting tile, go over here, get a Dorito, and get themselves a city for like 28 points and 2 meeples back. So that's an interesting thing. The more their city grows, the more severe becomes the impact of one side potentially getting a meeple majority on this city and completing it. Which is why I decided not to do that. Now, why do I pass up 7 points here and potentially many, many more? In order to make decisions like this, like whether it's worth invading and taking the risk of your opponent going over here, you need to take into account the overall game position. And the overall position of the game looks actually pretty good for yellow here. I have more points on the scoreboard, and I have some awkwardly placed cities, but I can deal with them. I will probably, most of the time, I get one of these 2 meeples blocked, but not both. And I can deal with one block meeple. Because my main money roll, these 2 monasteries for 18 points. And that actually makes my position pretty good. I will be getting meeples back. And even if the worst scenario fulfills, the chances of me winning, even if my opponent makes that big ruin, are better compared to the chances that I'm allowing myself if my opponent does get this city cap. Because also think about this, there are like 45 tiles remaining, and there are 6 tiles that automatically make my position severe, like really, really severe. So putting me maybe at like a 20% chance of winning. So 6 out of 45, it's what, like just under 15% or something. It's more than 10%. It's 15%. No, less. A bit under 15%. And it's not a chance that I'm willing to take. And I do feel quite good about my monastery position. But there's also one additional factor to it. This is not the last cow in the deck. I still have a 50-50 chance to draw the last cow to complete the connection anyway. So that's why I pass it up, and instead I add a point to my opponent's city, also adding a point to my monastery, and I'm also now threatening to get a Dorito tile, block their city, and then another tile that would recover my monastery meeple for them. So this is a combination of factors, with the fact that I do have a useful move with this cow tile elsewhere on the board, the fact that there's still one remaining in the deck, and so on and so on. These are all factors, but I wanted to point out that when making these decisions, the overall game position, the overall win percentage is what matters a little bit more than the probabilities surrounding this situation. For example, without these 2 monasteries, I'm probably rolling the dice and completing the invasion here. Now, of course, I immediately do find out that my opponent does not get an invasion tile, and imagine from their perspective, if I were to invade, now they must be agonizing, because of course they want to place the 7-point monastery over here, but then they are the ones that leave this up for grabs. We never get to find out what they would have done in this position. Actually, they would have taken the 7-point monastery and then put me in the same spot. One other reason why I didn't want to do this, by the way, is because it would be bad for this city meeple. And you know why? So if I go over here, my opponent's next move, or even my next move, will be on this square. It will be either to draw the city cap and of course to complete the invasion, or to draw something like what I did. Then I would have to go over here and cover up the square just to deny this opportunity for my opponent. Both of these things would set up a blocking platform against this here city square, and this is also something that I did not want happening. So Aiba equals a 7-point monastery, and then through the remaining moves we're going to blitz out. We do see that they do manage to build up quite a big ruin, and I get to stay without meeples for a while, but not for long, as they do end up giving me a meeple back, actually quite mistakenly. And I get to build up my monasteries in a relatively safe way, And even though it looks like my opponent has a boatload of meeples and a boatload of points on the scoreboard, I get to be the first on what's going to be a hugely, hugely important field. I get to even protect some of my cities, and they make a little mistake here, allowing me some quick points over here. And this leads us to the last cow tile. So this is kind of fun. My opponent has again increased the ruin even further. And they even added a second meeple to help them a little bit. So the question is, do you place the cow tile there to connect or not? And I won't even make you pause the video. The answer is of course not. I don't want to place the cow there because this would be only temporarily equalizing the city. Of course, they're going to get a Dorito of their own and get a 2-1 majority on this ruin, and then I'm actually losing. So it's funny how I drew 3 cow tiles, and for different reasons, here, here, and here, I actually can't afford to be placing them in this square where I want. But after my opponent invested a second meeple here, I think it's okay for me. I decided to use the cow also productively, blocking my opponent's city, which works immediately. You can see how many city caps there were in the deck. Now they actually can't complete this city easily at all. And I believe that city even ends up not being completed. We also see that we both get to draw a couple of starting tiles. And after an exchange of quick points, I'm already ahead on the scoreboard as a result of those monasteries, which again are wonderful. I also get to meeple a new road, which is just also something else. I get to complete the road, and well, this is of course a bit unnecessary. I even get the most fortunate draw ever of quickly finishing that city, which of course I'm not going to finish that city because that would also be giving a meeple back to a Yiba. I want to finish the city here to give a meeple back to just myself. And at the rest of the game, we really don't have to look necessarily. Now, I am just ahead too much on the scoreboard. I already have a strong position on the main field, which has 4 completed cities on it, 12 points, a bunch of green squares, and so on. My opponent has a big ruin, but this is simply not enough. And my opponent does not have really big threats in this position. They do have, however, one threat. You notice how they have a splitter tile available to them. In fact, 2 of those. They could use one of those tiles to finish a city for 8 points over here, separating from these pieces of junk. And they could use the other tile to go over here in combination with 2 more Doritos or 2 more city caps, finishing a much more sizable 16-point city for them in the meeple back. And then they would be ahead. So this is why I decide to sacrifice 2 points and a juicy, juicy shielded tile to do this. Now I make sure that my opponent is tied to this blocked city, because of course there's nothing fits into the square, so this won't be completed. Now the only way how they can benefit from a splitter is going over here, and they will be finishing on an 8-point city, and that's a threat which I simply can withstand. So early in the game, of course, with a different score, I would not make that move, but when you're ahead, you just got to eliminate the biggest threat of your opponent. Also note a couple of interesting moves. So they now very nicely drop a farmer, and they're trying to connect to my main field through one of the 2 curves, which is actually their chance to win. I decide to pre-meeple that road, making sure that when they connect to the field, they will be giving me a road meeple back. And what I'm trying to do essentially now is to either keep myself a majority on the field, or I'm trying to even maybe concede the field, but just score enough so that I can still win. Then they, of course, very smartly drop a farmer. I can't really deal with that. I just get a meeple back. But all I need to do is just to equalize that farmer. They get to score a couple of points for themselves. That's at the bottom off screen. And now This is just a bit of a technical move. I go over here for 3 points. And this is to make sure that if they draw the best possible sequence of going over here, and they do win the field, then they also are bringing my other meeple in. Now, it is still possible for them to win the field theoretically, but this would require them to place one more meeple into the field, maybe like somewhere here, invading like this. And if they drop a farmer, then they can't score anymore, unless, of course, they draw a splitter to get their city back. So they actually still have some winning chances in this. I'm just trying to prevent the worst case scenarios here. I was actually considering dropping a farmer here myself, which maybe would have been a more precise move. I just figured the reason why I didn't want to do that is because there's still a road monastery in the game. And a road monastery allows them to drop a farmer like anywhere on the board. For example, they can get a straight line, go over here, drop a farmer here, get a road monastery and connect like this. So I really don't want to be investing in farmer, as my point is trying to just score as much as possible and outrun the worst case scenario. They get the last remaining curve, but this is where my road meeple comes handy. They want to, of course, still try to play for the field as their only chance, but they're giving me a 6-point road and a meeple back in the process. I'm quite fortunate to draw the road monastery, but still, it wasn't necessary. I then here just simply figured that field invasions are no longer possible after the road monastery is drawn, the field is tied, and I do end up even drawing both splitters, which again was not necessary. I will be ending up winning this game plus 30. And in fact, it would have even been a bit more instructive had my opponent drawn a splitter and the monastery, because in most cases I would still be just holding on by a couple of points. It's just difficult for them to get a meeple back and then find an invasion square for the field and do all of those things. Now, when it comes to tile draws, I think the moment where I was particularly fortunate was the fact that I got out with this meeple alive. At that point, it wasn't necessary in order to win. Really, this sequence with the road, with the city, with the monasteries, which was all actually within reasonable probabilities, that was kind of enough to withstand. As you can see, the difference is around 20 points, just over 20 points. So yeah, that was the game. Just drawing 2 early monasteries and then building them up. A little bit of help from my opponent over here, but overall they played actually quite a decent game. And the reason I wanted to show this game, or at least parts thereof, although I did manage to show all of it without intention really, was just about this funny situation, how I do end up with a 3-point city and I end up drawing all the invasion tiles, but for different reasons I can't use them properly, and this does indeed turn out justified. And this brings out to round 4. I'm feeling pretty good about my chances as I am on 3 out of 3. And now I'm playing against the Italian master Giulio Tomao, former Italian champion, member of national team, of course, or even captain. I forgot who their captain was. So a strong player. And they get the first monastery, and they, in fact, are the starting player. Of course, I can't keep being the starting player forever. And the start of this game does not go that well for me necessarily. I do get away with an 8-point city over here, as you can see shortly. First of all, I have an interesting decision with a monastery. I could place it over here for 5 points. Or I could place it over here for 5 points. And the choice is not obvious necessarily. So a year ago, I would have placed over here, pretty much in a heartbeat. Maybe not a year ago, but like 2 years ago. And the reason for this is that simply this nets more points immediately. It scores 5, and this move scores 4, because it also adds a monastery point to your opponent. But it's not as simple as this. If I place over here, which I did, this monastery has a lot of benefits. First of all, it nicely supports my city, so when I will be finishing my city, I will be getting that extra monastery point anyway. And this also doesn't allow some nasty move from my opponents, maybe like they can place a curve here and try and add them a monastery point while also blocking my city, so I don't want to allow that. But the most important reason is that I actually want to take out this monastery spot more than I want to take out this monastery spot. There are still 4 monasteries in the deck, and if yellow happens to draw one of them, they can place it over here with a yellow meeple over here, imagine that. And then they get to do the stacking approach, they get to control my city, then they get to build out like this, which is super, super fun for them. And then unless I find a move like the Ukrainian technique, for which you still need to draw a suitable tile in time, like I did in my round 2 game against Helgi, then I'm in a difficult position. But now if they draw a monastery and go over here and place a meeple here, now my position is not as bad, because this monastery nicely equalizes this monastery. Okay, let me just switch to a neutral color here. So these two guys are equal. So it doesn't matter whether they get built up or not. And then if they build a monastery over here, then they will be building 1 monastery rather than 2. So this means that with every tile that they place, they will be scoring 1 monastery point instead of 2 monastery points, and that's really a big deal. So it is absolutely worth, for all these reasons, to be taking that 1 point sacrifice here. And I do get to finish my 8 point city, so my position is doing pretty good. They get to separate our roads and start a little field, and I decide to start a counter field. The placement could look a little bit tricky, but there are some reasons for this. There are also some situations where, obviously it's just a 3-point farm, but either me or our opponent, they will be taking out those city caps, completing those cities, so it will very quickly turn into a 9-point field, which is worth investing a meeple. And then it could either loop all the way through the outside, making its way into a big field, or it could just get trapped at 9 points, which is perfectly fine. Or maybe with one more divider, if we're lucky enough, a lot of city caps, we can actually score a boatload of points with this sort of pattern. And this just happened to be the best position in the deck, best position on the board for farm, if you ask me. Then, of course, I had an opportunity to go over here and start a new city, but I really don't like what this does to the board. And, well, anyway, that was my decision. Now I end up starting a 5-point monastery here. I decide to sacrifice a monastery point because even though I could be placing a monastery over here, this configuration with the black meeple here, like this diagonally, it's actually not that powerful. And in order to get 2 of my meeples back, I would be forced to add a tile over here that gives yellow a meeple back, and I wouldn't want to be doing that. Instead, they get the monastery, but it's not such a big deal. It looks like dangerous stacking, but it's just a single monastery for all intents and purposes, because these 2 guys sort of cancel each other out. So by adding a tile over here, they're not getting 2 extra monastery points. They're getting 1. So this is not really that dangerous. I get to build up my field. They get to score some quick points. They're also kind of smart because you see they are disrupting the idea of me building a 6-point loop by placing these 2 points in a particular way, but I'm just happy to get my road meeple away and also block down their field a little bit. Yeah, one of the reasons for this monastery placement was to actually control these green squares. This farmer, even though it looked great, now actually doesn't look all that great. So now there are 2 completed cities on their farm, and they could be building a 3rd and a 4th city, but where will they be building? This square is restricted, and these 3 squares are under my monastery's control. So in order to build new cities on the farm, they're forced to continue my monastery, which they either won't do Or if they do that, then I get compensation. They decide to continue the monastery and drop a farmer, which is a move that makes sense, but I don't think is the strongest. I probably prefer just taking out the city cap over here, starting a new city. I get to build up my monastery. Normally, I don't like putting curves next to my monasteries like this, because you typically want to save that juicy spot for another monastery. But given the fact that 4 monasteries are already on the board, only 2 of them are remaining in the deck, so it's actually not really likely that I'm going to draw one. And this move also nicely restricts the field. The plan is to later do something like this and actually build up my monastery in a way that gets the meeple back and also keeps this guy trapped at 6 points. They start a new city. I keep scoring some points. They now try to do something very, very sneaky. So I intended this video at first to show my moves, but here definitely credit goes to my opponents. They are creating a very big threat of completing a lip-shaped city through my monasteries, and they're building it very smartly. So you see this square here is both a square for my monastery and for the city. And whenever there is a shared square, the side with the city, to create a true threat, they want to build around that square and then finish that square last. And what they're trying to do at the moment is maybe get a Dorito tile and then get one of the 3 remaining, as you can see, cow tile that fit into that square. And they would get a lot of points, like 18 for that city or something. Well, it depends on whether these tiles have shields or not. And now I have a difficult decision. I have a lovely tile. So without this move over here, it's actually quite an easy decision for black. I can go... Wait, let me just skip to this. I can go over here and start a new city. And it's also very nicely... It sort of has the same idea that I can build around... the monastery of my opponent and then try to finish the shared square last. And this also means that they can't finish their monastery because they would be adding a point to my city and bringing my city too close to completion. So basically I could try to do the thing that Julio is trying to do to me here. But I can't do that because the threat of them covering up is just so immediate that I need to act. At first, I actually thought of placing this move regardless, since in this position they're like a little bit ahead, although actually for now it's an equal position. But they have another threat. They could get a city cap, place a city cap over here with a farmer, by the way, then gets a Dorito tile to finish the city like that, city cap plus Dorito, get a farmer in the field and a majority against this guy. Ultimately, if they maybe draw a couple of tiles to unify the 2 fields. And just because there's so many threats, I have to do this. I'm forced to add a point to my opponent's city, 2 points to my opponent's city, sacrifice a juicy fielded tile, which really, really belonged over here. And this is not all. Because I'm blocking my own monastery and I'm also blocking their city, I'm doing it in such a way that allows their city platform for expansion. So they'll be scoring more points for their city, whereas my monastery meeple is trapped. So my move looks very, very suboptimal. It's just in this position it was forced. But it was forced because my opponent created that threat in the first place, so credit goes for them for sure. Julio now probably finishes the monastery, but they... I think make a mistake here. They should meeple the city here. The city is just way, way, way too good. And for example, if I get something like a Dorito tile, then suddenly I can go over here and then they might not get tiles available to invade. They might get some row tiles from here. Like, look at those clunkers. So they're playing with fire here a little bit, although they are a bit ahead on the scoreboard, and it's a slightly better position for them. I get a monastery to stack. It's important that I don't place it over here, because it's a bit of an awkward building pattern. Although, actually, maybe over here would not have been that bad. because I still get to control all those field squares, and I can still build around like this. But the problem with this move, there are several moves. If I were to place a monastery over here, first of all, it would only share one square with my other monastery, this one, compared to this orientation where it shares two squares, this and this. So I get to score 2 points twice, quite easily, with the curve in a straight line, and I would be getting a meeple back quicker. And as for field control, is still the same, except that this is a little bit better because it's harder to build farms, to build city. There's really only one true green square, and I will be probably using a straight line there shortly. The advantage of this move would be that it's controlling this city, because somebody's going to be meepling that city eventually. But ultimately what made me decide is the final disadvantage of that move, assuming that somebody finishes that city. Maybe that city is shared. Then this farmer can loop around over here like that and become one big field together with that guy. And then that's a field for which I will have trouble fighting for, because my meeples will be stuck in monasteries while I'll build them up, and with the meeple minority, you really don't want to be moving into big field fights. My opponent gets some quick points. I build up... Oh no, I start a 4-point road, of course. I need to take out that scoring spot. Now, very smart move from my opponent. They block here a little bit, and they're trying to play against my monasteries, maybe creating a blocking platform. But most importantly, if they were not to go here, with this tile, I would have started a 4-point city, a 6-point city, and actually created a threat of completing that city. But now that I can't attach a tile over here, this is very, very awkward. The only way how I can do something is maybe start a city like this, but it's actually not that easy to complete it, or at least create the threat of completing that city anyway. This is also pretty bad, because I'm exposing multiple squares for easy blocks. I'm also freezing my road, because if I continue my road, then my opponent blocks here. And I don't really have enough meeples to be meepling a city without the intention of completion. I could also go here and fight for my opponent's 8-point ruin. I just figured that 8 points is not enough to justify a meeple investment, and I really don't have enough resources to fight for a ruin, because I'm, well, again, short on meeples, and my opponent can simply re-invade over here. So I ended up doing quite an unproductive move. Well, I started a new city at the top, which I guess still creates some threat, and I probably don't regret it necessarily, but I honestly don't know what the strongest move in this position is. I figured that I would go there. I will be curious also to hear your suggestion in the chat, regardless of your experience and skill level. But the point of this move was to create at least some semblance of a threat. I can get a Dorito to cover up. There's still 5 of those remaining. I need only 3 of those. There's still 2 splitters. Like, this city sometimes gets completed. And if my opponents get something like a big city tile and invade, honestly, I'm just happy. Like, this meeple would be canceling one of my opponent's meeples, and this would mean just like found a productive use for an awkward tile. But it was my opponent's play over here that made that tile awkward for me in the first place. They now start a new city, which is actually kind of dangerous. We're going to see why in a second. They now go over here, and now I, of course, I'm not going to go over here and score just 4 points. I am kind of behind on the scoreboard, and even though my monasteries look good, I need to create bigger threats. So I go over here and grab a city for 6 points. And yes, I know that I didn't like the unification of these 2 farmers potentially, and if I get to complete my city, then the farmer goes over here. But it doesn't matter. I get to complete a city. It's really big. It's going to be 14 points. 14 points in a meeple back is a lot. So they continue their ruin, and I get a monastery meeple back anyway. They now invade my city, which they absolutely should do. Had they not done that, with this tile, I would have completed it. And now, that's actually okay. I've invested 1 tile into the city, and they have invested 1 tile. They have only 1 point on this side, and I have 6 points on this side. And there are really not many tiles available still for them to connect, so there are some scenarios where I actually get to preserve the little points majority over here, and the game could be close enough for those points to matter. So I finish my road, start a new city. I also need to point out that this here configuration successfully prevents this farmer from looping all the way into this field. This now won't be happening. My opponent again playing really, really well. They're scoring 2 points, dropping a city cap in what's currently only their field, and they're creating an attacking platform against my city. I really don't get to do much. This is a move where I spent a lot of my time. I was thinking of going over here because it would cover up 1 potential invasion platform, but then it also makes my city a little bit more difficult to complete. So in this configuration, I need maybe 3 city caps. This configuration would need 4 city caps, or maybe Dorito city cap. Now, in hindsight, maybe I probably should have done this, because there are actually enough Doritos in the pool to threaten that city. But I did something else instead. I just went over here to restrict this city cap a little bit to not allow them to score easy city points. Although in hindsight, I really didn't restrict it by a lot. Because there's still a splitter that fits there. But before I placed the tile there were 2 tiles that fits there. I also make sure that I actually restrict their field in general, that it's harder for them to add points to their field. Currently also notice how these 2 farmers aren't connected. They might be connected in the future, but this farmer currently is separate and it scores 3 points more because of this completed cities over here. But if I manage to keep this field close enough, then I might not even have to spend tiles to unify it. Because if I spent 2 road tiles to unify the field, I could just spend the 2 tiles over here for just 2 points instead of 3, but also making some other things which benefit me positionally. So there is a bit of value in restricting of this field. I wasn't sure if that's the best move. Maybe just going over here was actually better. Do let me know what y'all think in the comments here. Now, this, again, with a straight line, I have another quite difficult decision. Because here I need to count a lot of the remaining tiles and figure out how am I going to develop my monastery. I need to think whether I go here and try to set up another monastery, or maybe a curve plus curve sequence, or if I go here and try to create a curve plus curve sequence like this. Now, what are the pros and cons? So this, of course, is sort of the standard way to build a monastery, but 5 monasteries in the deck already. No, 5 monasteries on the board, it's only 1 in the deck, so it's really not that likely that I will be drawing the last monastery. Although if I will, this will be the most efficient way of building this. That way, though, I'm restricting the field, and I'm trying to build it like this. I also get a use for otherwise unproductive curves, and I actually get to meeple the 6-point road afterwards, and maybe an 8-point road, so this could be an efficient way of building. I went for this, and as we can see in a couple of tiles, as my opponent just in case drops a second farmer, I decide to restrict their field again. So this is a very flexible farmer, actually. It serves 2 purposes. It supports the main farmer in case these 2 fields are unified, and then they're threatening to get a 2 versus 1 majority. Now, if they do not invade, well, then this isn't farmer in its own right, and it could score up to 6 points because there's still tiles that fit into that square. So that is a problem for me. I decided to, first of all, make it less likely that they invade and eat up my farmer. And then with the threat of them increasing their fields, it's something that we can deal with later. But then again, maybe it was just better to go over here. But it turns out that it wasn't, because another important thing with this move, I'm actually taking away green squares from their city, from their farm rather. So for example, with this tile, they now cannot go over here and keep developing their field endlessly. And even though points-wise we're actually pretty close, and I will be getting back this meeple over here, because they have that temporary meeple majority, I won't be able to do much about their field. Instead, they go over here, and they decide to leave this city open. So there are some reasons for this, but basically it's a bit of a coin flip of who gets that city cap first. They're also restricting my guy. And of course, I get the road monastery, so had I set this up, I would have been in great shape, but not really, because I would have to use my last meeple. And that's not necessarily what we want to be doing. I took 2 points, of course. And then later I do get to score a little bit, the 6 point for a city. But unfortunately, as we will see, not right now, but a little bit later. First of all, unfortunately, they do draw one of the city cap that fit for my square, for this square. They start a new city over here, and I decide to use this tile to block this square, even though I would have loved to use it for my city. So there are already 3 tiles that were suitable for my city up north, which I end up using elsewhere. They still have 2 tiles that go over here, and not only do they get the shared city points, they also get to get points for both of these farmers and expand their field through the left. So I really have to prevent this. And additional bonus from this move, I'm exposing a bit of an attacking platform here. They block my meeple. I now happen to draw a curve tile, and I decide to leave the city cap empty because they already need a meeple over here. So they need a city cap to recover their meeple, and its meeple is sort of a bit dangerously placed. Then I might have time to score for this other city cap. They try to block me, I get a curve, finish a monastery finally, and I get to meeple a 6 point road, which of course is a worthy investment of a meeple this late in the game. So at least tactically, like everything's tough against this farmer, I feel like I managed really well, because I did get away with 2 monasteries and ultimately placed a meeple which completely equalizes this farmer and then some. The problem is that my opponent has all these threats. And now I have a city tile with not many places to use it, and given the fact that there's still a Dorito and a Splitter and all this combo and stuff, I decided to go for this at the top. So I do have a chance to finish my city, and at that time it felt like creating such a threat was necessary. I also need to point out that at this time I was extremely low on time, because a lot of these subtle decisions I spent a really long time on. So I wasn't fully aware of the point situation. This is something that I need to work on. Like, whenever there's time pressure, my mental arithmetic in Carcassonne specifically is very often off, and it will happen several later times in the tournament. My opponent scores 4 points, and they don't finish their city because it's now super safe, and they're trying to finish it later. Now I have a decision. Do I go over here and try to build up my city and also maybe finish it with a city cap and a Dorito and a city cap? So this actually would increase the probability of me finishing that city. But I figured that this threat over here is more important. But in time pressure, I ended up blundering. I made this move, whereas of course I should have turned the city cap, the cow tile, the other way to make the platform more exposed. That's actually quite a big mistake, but I really blitzed out that move without thinking too much. It was down to a few seconds. They get to, of course, threaten the completion of that city. I end up trying to attack them. They get the Dorito tile, so they get to threaten the city again. And I get the splitter tile, which is actually great news, because this means that my opponent won't be getting the splitter tile to go over here and score 7 points. So this is the move that I played. I was short on time, but I did calculate that this move would actually give me a 60% winning chance. So only the thing that I need to do to win is just draw one of these city caps. Now the purpose of this move is twofold. I prevent my opponent from completing a city. I think that's pretty obvious, because then I lose on the spot. And then I have to meeple this city cap to not allow an easy city for my opponent. But they get the first city cap. They get to add 1 point to them. Then I get a straight line. They get 2 quick points for a road. And then I get a straight line, and I don't get to do anything because I don't have meeples. And they get the city cap over here for 3 points for a farmer. So in the last couple of moves, they scored 6, and I scored 1. As a result, when all is said and done, 3 points is the difference, and this happens to be my first loss in the tournament against Giulio Tomà of Italy. Now, as you can see, so several issues with this game. The time trouble, which of course was caused by not great time management. For example, when I was debating like where to take these quick points and how to build the monastery, this could have been done sooner for sure. But definitely credit goes to Giulio for creating all these threats, especially over here, that forces me to use such a good tile in a necessary but self-destructive way. And then even though, like on this part of the board, I think what I managed to do was really, really good, the fact that they got those fields and they had this city threat, which I was chasing around, this ended up helping them win. Yeah, and I just felt that they played really, really well, because like sometimes when I play against an opponent, and there will be several moments like this later in the tournament, even if they overall playing well, like sometimes they make a mistake and like I notice, aha, and like it suddenly like feels very good. Okay, like now I have an advantage. This game, they didn't really do anything like this. So kind of every move that they played was a move that sort of annoyed me slightly. Well, maybe the one exception was this city cap, actually. So with this city cap, they ended up restricting my city and ultimately blocking it. But it was relieving because they ended up blocking a city in their farm on their own. So it's actually ended up a bit of a wash and ultimately favored me because I won the coin flip over here. But yeah, but if you're going to play the Mind Sports Olympiad, you're going to just have to deal with an opponent who played really, really well. And that's unfortunate. And what's more unfortunate is that I have lost in round 4. And because in order to qualify for the playoffs, you need to get 6 out of 7 wins. Because I already have 1 loss, I can't afford any more losses. Which brings us to round 5. I'm playing against Lisa Tseng of Taiwan. And this game is worth showing, not if not in full, but at least highlighting some interesting moments. So far, some obvious moves. I actually just want to point out, so this city cap placement. So this was my aha moment that made me feel really good. This is, of course, a mistake, and I'm kind of surprised that Lisa, who is a master actually, so she did cross a 700 threshold of ELO on Board Game Arena and has represented Team Taiwan on multiple occasions at the World Team Carcassonne Online Championship. But the move here is clearly to turn the city cap the other way. So this could have even been a misclick. Whenever you leave a city cap open, which had to be the case because she's drawing a tile with 2 city caps, she has to meeple one and leave the other one open. Then you want to restrict that. So you want to be turning that city cap like this to minimize the number of tiles with which I can gain these easy 4 points. And of course, I'm gaining those easy 4 points. And with that I'm pretty happy. And then comes another mistake, which makes me immensely happy. Again, I'm not sure if that was a misclick. I don't think it was. So this type of move, it looks strong, like it gets your road meeple back and drops a farmer. But it is a huge waste of a monastery. Like, monasteries are incredibly powerful in Carcassonne, as you may have seen, for example, from my round 3 game against Yiba, or from Helga's game against me. And to deny yourself such pleasure, it's just not wanting to win, and it made me so happy. Now, the farm, of course, is also decent, but there was no urgency in dropping a farmer. Like, you get the monastery, then on the next move you get something like a straight line, and then you drop the farmer upon getting your 5th monastery point. But I've noticed that monasteries were used in farms earlier on, so this was a very common thing in early to mid 2010s, especially for European players. There was all this mindset that Carcassonne is all about fields. It was a bit later, like after COVID era, for example, when also Japanese players and East Asian players started to win a lot of tournaments, that their game started showing that Carcassonne is really not all about the fields. It's a balance between all 4 features. You have to know how to play fields, cities, roads, and monasteries. Whereas, like, in 2015, you could get this tile and draw a farmer. You could get another monastery and drop a farmer and just only use monasteries for patches of green. But monasteries are, of course, not easy to build. Like, very often, if I make a video sometimes about strategy or about monasteries, and then I get comments like, oh, but I don't like monasteries because, like, whenever I draw one and I meeple, then I always get blocked. Well, yeah, because it's actually not easy to build monasteries in a way that doesn't get blocked, but there is a way. Or there is a way to build monasteries that gets them blocked, but makes sure that you get some very good compensation for it. So what else? We have some obvious move. We're going to reach some key positions in due course. My opponent is, of course, building up. I am now trying to finish a big city. And now Lisa drops a 2nd farmer, which is a thing that makes sense to do. But it's now basically defined the strategy for me for the entire game. So she forces the position into something that doesn't leave me a lot of choice. So what does this farmer do? Well, her main farmer scores 9 points already, about to score 12 if I complete the city. This city has a sufficient number of green squares for development. If I choose to continue my road, I will probably be giving a couple of green squares as well. So it makes sense to start a big field like this. And she's supporting it with her 2nd meeple. So that's actually a good move. But this also makes me realize something important. My chances of tying this field are really low. First of all, my meeples are still tied up. This guy could get blocked eventually. And really trying to drop 2 farmers before even Lisa drops a 3rd is not a productive endeavor, at least for now. So what I see in this position already at this point, I try to plan for the rest of the game. I see this 6-point field over here. And this can allow me to eventually drop a farmer for a counter field. So if she has a 12-point farmer with 2 meeples, I can score a 6-point farmer with 1 meeple. And because her 2 meeples will be tied up over here, she can build up that field and probably won't be able to fight for this one. So we both will be building up our fields. Mine will be less, but I will be spending 1 meeple instead of 2, and then trying to use that extra meeple to accomplish something meaningful on the board. So this would be the concept of a counter field. If these tiles are not here, then my position is a little bit worse because there's really no field alternatives. There are just 2 things that I need to consider. First of all, my scoreboard situation isn't great. because I'm behind rather than ahead. So I probably need to try and create some threats and make features that get my meeple back, finish this road, try to finish that city, maybe draw a monastery that fits into this square and complete a monastery. That's also one way. But I would need to have the counter field and something else. And the second factor is board geometry. I need to be careful about not giving too many green squares to my opponent when I build up my road. And I also need to make sure that I don't put a road monastery over here as a road end, because it would expand Lisa's field to include all these guys as well. So we're going to look at a couple more moves. By the way, note how my threat of completing the city made my opponent go over here and try to create an attacking platform, which makes sense because my city is a big threat. I get to protect my other city. She now uses, quite correctly, the cow tile to prevent my city from being completed immediately in the way that she has to use that. The reason why you don't want to be pointing the cow the other way is the fact that there's still so many Doritos that pattern of completing the city with 3 Doritos is super likely. Now I need to complete my city with 2 city caps, one of which is quite restricted. And I already need a lot of these city caps for this city over here. And then ultimately, yeah, so I talk about not giving my opponent green squares, and I'm just giving them loads of green squares. But there are some reasons for this. I really just wanted to avoid the road monastery thing. So now I'll make sure that my road is sort of tied to a crossroads, and like she has green squares anyway. So the downside of this idea is that if red draws a lot of city caps to develop her field, then she is going to win the game, and there's no stopping that. But it's just a risk that I have to take. I continue my road. She tries to do all kind of things. Also note how she's restricting my city, which I would have not completed but prolonged while also taking a 6-point road. But actually I think she had another sneaky idea. If you just place this tile a bit to the left, then you're creating that pre-block opportunity that maybe she can draw the Dorito with the road, score 6 points, and then make my meeple face into this blocked square and lose it. But yeah, her move certainly makes a lot of sense in the short run, and I decide to start a new road and leave a Dorito tile in my field. It's just a very difficult tile to place, but I need to make a productive move somehow, and with 5 straight lines and 2 crossroads and 2 starting tiles still remaining, going for a 4-pointer seemed like a reasonable move. Obviously, I have to continue my road in order not to get blocked. And I say obviously, but there are some reasons to this. At this point, I had actually miscounted the tiles. For some reason, I assumed that this was the last starting tile, whereas there's still 1 remaining in the deck. So luckily, it didn't really hurt me by too much, because I now get this lovely Dorito tile and I get to build a city over here, which is super safe. And now it is, as we're going to see in a second, completely covered up. I don't have a meeple to place on a monastery, and my opponent manages to restrict the road and also drop a farmer, which is smart. So her idea is that if I want to get my road meeple back, I will be placing a tile over here and scoring 2 points, but I will be letting her into a field. And that eventually is a 9 or even 12-point field, because I will be finishing this city, and this city will be finished by somebody in all likelihood, and so on. So I managed to restrict her meeple. I get one of my outs to get a 3-point road and a 4-point city and a meeple back. So now I'm climbing back a little bit into this game. Lisa's making a smart move, at the same time restricting the road, but also making sure that it can be finished with a road monastery, which would be so devastating for me. Because if there's a big field fight, I don't have the resources to withstand that. Like, even though like Lisa has this blocked meeple, because it still takes time for me to get these guys back, there's just no way I'm winning this field fight. So with this move, I was even considering going over here and blocking my own road just to make sure that a road monastery tile is not drawn here. And the reason I didn't do that is because I had a better move. Although this is not the move that I remember making. Why did I place it over here? Okay, I thought that I placed it over here. Actually, I think this would have been a little bit stronger. But the idea is the same. That I want to be restricting options of this red guy entering the field through the right. And I want to make sure that this path is closed so that red is actually forced to finish my road and give me a meeple back if she wants access to this field. But why I didn't go over here is now kind of completely beyond me. Well, there are some reasons. I guess this makes it harder for the city to be completed. And because I perceived my opponent to have the meeple advantage, which I really shouldn't have because it's equal, then I didn't want to make it easy for somebody to... Oh, yeah, it's actually possible to finish the city. Like, if she gets a city cap, goes here, gets a triple city, and invades, and then she has the majority, and this sort of makes sure in advance that she doesn't get that done. Or if she gets a majority on the city, at least it doesn't get completed. Actually, it's, well, really almost impossible to get completed. And another thing, because for some reason I thought that there were no starting tiles available, I thought that going over here with a curve would create a complete block against this square, forcing red to go into the field through that way, whilst also giving me a road meeple back. Also, this curve move would expand the field and potentially give me green squares if she chooses never to invade, or if I draw both of these road tiles. Lisa now decides to block my road herself, which actually is a relief to me, but I think she should do this anyway, because if she doesn't, I have all kinds of threats. For example, I can get a crossroads, go over here, drop a farmer, finish my road with a curve, and get a majority on this field. Not something that she would have liked. And also, this leaves a sneaky opportunity to go here, 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 and unite all those farms like this. The city is being completed. Yeah, here I thought, again, that I was actually blocking this entry square completely, even though I wasn't. There, of course, still one tile that fits there. We exchange some quick points. She starts a new field, which makes sense. I decide to start a new monastery and unite her fields. And there are several reasons for this move. So first of all, I would have generally liked to fight for her field instead, because it's going to be 9 points, and it does become to be 9 points. But I actually can't do that easily, because she will be very soon covering it up. And I also don't like spending tiles unproductively. So at the very least, I unify the two fields. And I figure that there's a lot of road tiles which I don't get to use productively. So there's 6 road tiles. At least those I counted correctly. And there are 5 more squares to fill. And so by starting a monastery, I actually make sure that there's a productive move no matter what I draw, with almost any single tile. And also even something as simple as a cow tile possibly could be used over here in combination with a city cap or something like this. Still, maybe it's not necessarily the strongest move. Maybe keeping a meeple and having more patience was a little bit better. For example, had I known that there was still one starting tile available, I could have gone over here, and this would actually fully block this square, and this would make sure that this meeple cannot make it through here, only through the left. Right, so let's just fast forward a little bit. She blocks my monastery completely, but I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily need my meeple back, and I just want to get some extra points. And to score those points, here I decided to cover up that idea of red potentially going all the way through here and eating up my farmer. With one road Dorito that's still here, still available, I really didn't like that opportunity. But I guess I could also cover it up differently. I think I could have just gone here straight up. I wasn't sure exactly who's going to have the advantage, because like there's this city that I'm threatening that will put me ahead on the scoreboard, but Lisa has a lot of fields, and it's also not clear if she's going to draw this city over here. So the reason for this placement of the tile is I wanted to leave an option, if I have to use the umbrella tile over here with a farmer and a road Dorito tile to invade the eventually 9-point field myself with a combo of the last tiles. Now, if I do this, I also leave that option for my opponent, but there's also a chance that she either won't notice that idea or decide not to go for it for whatever reason. So she drops a city cap on her field. Of course, I try to clean them up, which I absolutely have to. And now, a very smart move from my opponent, eliminating a field connection platform. So now I can't drop a farmer over here, and she is over here with 9 points. But finally, I get one of my Dorito tiles. I finish my city for 12 points, which on a board like this is really a lot. She now decides to give me a meeple back and complete the connection. And I get even more meeples, and with so many points on the scoreboard, I'm very close to guaranteeing myself a victory. I also get another city cap to clean off my opponent's threats. And also mind you that I'm at that point thinking that there's no starting tile to fit into the square, which means that she can't make her field more than 9 points. I decided to take a 5-point road. And as you can see, I'm just simply keeping scoring. She does end up blocking my city invasion, of course, but it doesn't matter. As you can see, she scores 7 points on her penultimate move. And at that point, I was actually super surprised. It was like, what? Starting tile? At the start of the game, when this tile was drawn, I said to myself, this is the last starting tile. And normally when I do this, I don't recount. And this later helps so much later on, because very often, like, imagine if there are 4 tiles remaining and you just go like this, curve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, there's 1 remaining. And then you spend like 2 minutes doing this when you have maybe 3 minutes remaining and you need to think about actual strategy instead of just tile counting. So tile tracking super helps. If you just remember the missing tiles from earlier, then you don't think about them again. The downside is that if you get it wrong, well, then you get it wrong, and then later you don't correct it. So typically you want to do like a hybrid approach. You want to do mostly tile tracking, and then at a crucial moment recount. And I think if the game were closer and I've had a bit more time, I would have recounted, or at least I want to think like this. But luckily, this 7-point slip doesn't really cost me that much, and I do end up getting myself a couple of city points, and I'm going to see the score difference in just a second. You can see that despite an 18-point field from Lisa earlier on, which was completely uncontested, and a 12-point field on the right, I still win a game with a comfortable 13 points despite some really good tile draws towards the end. This is why you meeple monasteries in the start of the game, so I think these were 9 points essentially missed by my opponent, sadly. I did get some good draws with this tile over here, so my opponent ended up having her city blocked. But then also she got some decent draws with the 7-pointer over here, and blocking my field invasion and so on. So it's difficult to say what exactly won me this game. Well, first of all, this city for sure, it was an important find to have that rhombus shape in a way which is very quickly covered up. So these were 12 points and a meeple back. then the fact that I did, despite erroneous tile counting after all, I did restrict the route of this meeple into the field. And even though my opponent drew both crossroads, so she could have trapped my road meeple over here for 2 points, she was forced to use it to connect to the main field and give me a meeple back. And just generally the strategic approach of going for a counter field instead of trying to fight for a big field. So I did end up with this 9-point field, which even though it ended up being shared with my opponent, it did took a meeple away from her, and her invasion into this 9-point field forced some concessions on her part, which was enough to give me a sufficient number of points to put me over the edge. And of course, some fortunate draws of those city caps that I managed to clean off in her field certainly helped. So far, we've covered rounds 1 through 5. I have 4 wins and 1 loss, so there are 2 rounds remaining. In round 6, I am playing against the Croatian expert with a screen name Tompa99, and this is the game that we're gonna need to leave for next time. It has been quite a long video, and I figured that 5 games is enough. I'm gonna break it into either a 2 or a 3-part video series, so I hope to see y'all in a few days. I want to hear your feedback. Do let me know, first of all, if you have any questions about any particular moves or strategy issues, or if you would have done something differently. Second, you may have noticed that this video is a bit more low budget comparison to other videos, so there are no really fancy graphics. And because there's just so much to go through, I decided to simply get the video out earlier and draw stuff on the screen instead of using tiles for graphics, which typically takes a longer time. So do let me know what you prefer, more content sooner or better content with better graphic, but with greater delays. I would appreciate your opinion on that. Meeple the like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for way more competitive Carcassonne content like this, both live streams and uploads. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you soon.